All right, it is time for the Under Center podcast, and you know what day it is. If it's Wednesday, we're going to review Hard Knocks on HBO featuring our beloved Chicago Bears training camp edition. This was episode 5, of course, the last episode prior to the season commencing. This was heavy on the 53-man cuts. We fell in love with some players on episode 4, Ian Wheeler, Adrian Colbert, of course, the quarterback room. There's been a lot of players, and that's one of the good things about Hard Knocks is it kind of lends itself to you kind of getting to know some players who may end up or may not end up on the roster, and you kind of take that journey along with them for the ups and downs. It was interesting how it opened up. First of all, of course, I'm Kenneth Davis, and that's our Bears beat reporter, Alex Shapiro. I should have said that first. Tony Gill is running the pod. Of course, shout out Josh Schrack and Claire Flipperly for always holding down the show. The show opened up with the coaching staff discussing the players and looking at, the board as far as the different positional groups. So that was definitely interesting. I didn't know about the chandelier in Hallis Hall that had all the teams on there. Did you know that prior to this, Alex?
I did not. That was something that I learned, which was very cool. It just looks cool. It's like a nice kind of art lighting installation thing. And then when you learn more about it, that's awesome. That's awesome.
So if you didn't see it, there's a chandelier in Hallis Hall. And it's long, kind of cylindrical poles, and the poles are different colors depending on if the Bears had a winning season, if they made it to the playoffs, or if they won a Super Bowl. Right? I think if they won a Super Bowl, it was Bears colored orange. If they won a Super Bowl, so there's only one for 85.
No, there's a bunch of the 60s. I think they count the NFL championships also.
Oh, they count. They said Super Bowl on the show. You could be right. I'm not taking away what you said.
Because there were a few oranges. There was more than the one oranges. So I think they count the NFL championships before in the pre-Super Bowl era.
You can't. It doesn't.
What do you mean you can't?
You can't. It's not the same.
The American football, organized American football, professionally played outside of colleges, didn't just start when the AFL and the NFL merged.
But that's the point that I was getting to. How many AFL whatever. That's not what we're here. This is a great point. Alex and I will discuss this off show.
Follow us on Twitter for more in-depth discussion of the pre-AFL NFL merger.
Yeah. So again, one of the things I'll say this when they were discussing the cuts was a look inside of the quarterback room, and of course, who was going to be the quarterback, if they were going to keep 3 or 2 quarterbacks, and they decided to keep 2. So that left Brett Rippon and Austin Reed on the floor as far as getting cut. They did say this, and I like this behind the scene detail. We did know that Brett Rippon had beat out Austin Reed if they were keeping 3. And their preference, if Brett Rippon wasn't going to sign with another team, was to bring him back to be the quarterback that was on the practice squad. We saw that he did get a call from the Vikings, and he had negotiated that if he was on their active roster, he was going, as he should. So that left Austin Reed with that position, which was great. What did you think about the quarterback situation, Alex?
This will be an interesting conversation to follow because we're going to take one big fat L later. But or I'll give myself one big fat L later. But this was a small little W when we were doing our roster cuts preview episode, and we were it was the day before the Bears formed their initial 53-man roster. We were going through it all, and I think we talked about, we think Brett Rippon could be the practice squad guy if he doesn't land a job elsewhere, right? That's the big if. Because the Bears do really like what he brings in that quarterback room. That veteran experience is valuable. And he's also a bit of a conduit between the other quarterbacks and Shane Waldron, because he has some experience in Shane Waldron's offense from their time together previously. So having that voice, having that conduit player is something we know the Bears have liked before. In the past, it was Nathan Peterman, right? Last year, Nathan Peterman filled that role. And again, the Bears loved having him in that role. So obviously, it's a no-brainer for Rip to go take a job on an active roster as opposed to playing on a practice squad. That's a no-brainer. But yeah, I think we were right on there with the Bears preferring Rippon and then developing Austin Reed, because you can kind of view Tyson Bagent as not only a solid backup, but similarly a developmental quarterback in the same way that Austin Reed is, right? Tyson Bagent's floor is obviously higher right now just because he's been with the team longer. He has that NFL experience. He has those reps under his belt. But he's also a developmental guy at the same time. We still don't really know what Tyson Bagent's ceiling is. So I don't think the Bears necessarily needed two guys like that. It's nice to have two guys like that. It's a luxury to have two guys like that. But I think now when you look at the Bears quarterback room, it's got to be like the youngest, if not literally second youngest quarterback room in NFL history in terms of experience. You have two rookies and a second-year player. It doesn't get very much more inexperienced than that. Three rookies, I suppose, would be more inexperienced, but it doesn't get very much more inexperienced than that. So I think the Bears probably wanted a vet in there.
All right, before we get to probably the biggest one, let's get to the cuts first. And we already know we did our 53-man roster, so we know who was cut, but of course this pertains to Hard Knocks. Of course, Ian Wheeler's situation was going to feel tragic. Him talking to his mother, talking about going home to Houston to have the surgery. That one always tugged at your heartstrings. Theo was another one, but I think, and you can see it with Ryan Poles, the Adrian Colbert. That one was a hard one, particularly I think, Alex, when you're looking at players who have been around the league and there starts to be perhaps less of an interest at times because people may look at it as one, I can find a younger player with less wear on their tire who I can perhaps develop more than someone, quote unquote, who may be set in his ways. I do like that. And I like one thing, even though it seems like this was sterile at times as far as Hard Knocks under the Bears or whatever. I liked how they let us kind of get to know the character and the personality of Adrian Colbert and how the discussion between Ryan Poles and Ian Cunningham later, but Ryan Poles, everybody broke down. And he didn't do this with anybody else really, but he really broke down and left the room when Adrian first came into the room to get cut. And then they just talked about how hard it is when you're asking people to buy in and then release him, but how different of a person was and how the vibes were different. I appreciated a look into who the gentleman was, or the gentleman is, I should say. And also how it felt from the coaching or the front office to have to let him go. But your thoughts on those players I just mentioned and how when they were cut, Alex?
Yeah, it is tough to watch. And I think you're right when it comes to Adrian Colbert, 7th round pick who's played, I want to say 8 years in the league. And he is truthful with himself in terms of realizing, hey, this might be the end of the road for me, because how many teams are looking for an 8-year veteran backup safety when, as you said, there are probably younger options out there. And I believe he is still a free agent. I do still believe Adrian Colbert can help a team. And it doesn't necessarily mean his NFL career is over, right? Injuries will happen. His tape is out there. Obviously, the Bears think extremely highly of him. So you would imagine that Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus would talk him up if other GMs and coaches call them and say, hey, what do we have here in Adrian Colbert? So it doesn't necessarily mean the end of the road for Adrian Colbert, but it's a tough moment. Seeing guys like Theo Benedict, guys like Austin Reed, guys like Jake Curran, who are playing the numbers game and know they are facing an uphill battle. It ain't easy. It ain't easy to watch. It's not easy for those guys, especially when a lot of these guys did about as best as they could. They left it all out there. They shouldn't have regrets.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the unfair part of the business. When you did a really excellent job, Reddy Stewart, we didn't see Reddy Stewart in the show or in this episode, but guys who did nothing but make plays, did nothing but impress. But hey, sorry, there are just more guys ahead of you on the roster, even though you did literally the best you could. So yeah, those are the unfair moments. But it's nice to see. And, knowing going in that a lot of these guys do end up on the practice squad.
Yeah, definitely. I would say the Colin Johnson, the fact that, and that was also what you're saying, the guys that gave their all, but it was guys that were showing something and then their bodies betrayed them. And that's hurts, because you just think about, you only get so many opportunities perhaps to really latch on with a roster, let alone that's willing to invest in you, and that's always what's one of the best parts about Hard Knocks, is that it kind of lends itself to you getting feeling an emotional attachment to those players, as we were talking about, and everything, the ups and downs which they go through. One thing before we talk about Velus Jones, I want to talk about the editing in this episode. During practice, there was an edit where Caleb is taking reps at first versus the defense, and they never show the defense and offense reset. They never show them hiking the ball. So at first it kind of catches you because you're like, wait, what? Yeah. And that was a nice edit. That was a sweet edit. And then they did it where Caleb is going up against pads, and he's throwing the ball, and you have, like, on the sideline, he's talking to Shane Waldron, but then he's back again, and then he on the sidelines. So it's the edit it looks like these things are taking place almost at the same time, but it's how well they edited. And I want to shout out the editors on this one. That was a nice edit.
That was sweet. One little moment in that edit that I loved. Caleb Williams has one of the sweetest anticipatory throws, and it's such a beautiful view. It was right in the middle. It's DJ Moore along the right side after throwing to DJ Moore on the left side, where, again, the ball is out so early, and DJ Moore turns his head, and the ball's right there. If you want to know what we're talking about, when we're talking about Caleb Williams throwing the ball with anticipation, and, something that we hadn't seen from Bears quarterbacks in the recent past, that is what we are talking about. That is the perfect example. Go back and watch that little clip of the edit Kenneth was talking about. It's about halfway through. Again, it's a DJ Moore throw along the side. Ball's out. DJ Moore is still running his route. And truly, like, the moment DJ Moore turns his head around, the ball's right there. It's like, yeah, that's it. That's what we're looking for. That's it.
Right. There was also some practicing. And you had to love. This was like Bears fan sweetener. So you had Jalen Johnson asking Rome, to practice with him or whatever, and just to see what he can do coming out of his breaks. And just seeing someone at the elite standard that Jalen Johnson is at with this young rookie, and this young rookie giving him some go at times. You had something that I've been wanting to see, because I really want to see a lot more. Pardon me. I want to see a lot more of Montez Sweat during this season. And that could be Montez Sweat. So I'm not blaming the Bears on that one. But you had Montez Sweat helping out young rookie Austin Booker. You know what I'm saying? And so stuff like that. Again, if you were, just a Bears fan, and I think with most teams, but I'm speaking particularly being a Bears friend, hope springs eternal. And I know some people, like, I go on some people's shows and be like, here comes Ken with the reality. And I'm never like a soul crusher. I like to speak facts, but I always hope that the best thing happens. But it was good to see those players' interaction, and you hope that, that benefits those players, the pros, the vets, I mean to say, and those young rookies moving into this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to say, the hope does feel different, though. As someone who has grown up in Chicago, I'm all too familiar with the never-ending cycle of hope and despair, right? That this football team kind of just generates. It feels different. It feels different to me. And I don't know if it's because I'm around the team all the time now. I don't know if it's because of Hard Knocks. I don't know if it's because we live in the Twitter age where we see all of the social media clips and all the everything, and, the highlights are at our fingertips in a way that they never were before. But to me, it feels different. It doesn't feel like 2018 where they just kind of came out of nowhere and were, electric. It doesn't feel like Justin Fields, because Justin Fields is playing behind Andy Dalton. Doesn't even feel like Rex Grossman, because I feel like, or Mitchell Trubisky, because there were questions. I just feel like there are so many fewer questions. Obviously, there still are questions. Offensive line, defensive line depth. Every single NFL team in the country has those questions. To me, it feels like, whoa, the stars might actually be aligning here. This defense looks seriously legit. They might actually have the quarterback this time. And the weapons around the quarterback are the best they've ever been in Chicago Bears history, probably, right? I mean, like, probably, not even probably. It's almost certainly it's the best. It's the best. So it's kind of fun
It's kind of fun that Hard Knocks happened to generate this hype, to generate these feelings, to generate this hope. Because again, in my opinion, it does. It feels a little different. Do you not think that it feels a little bit different, Kenneth?
I'll answer that, but I want to get to what you're saying. I want you to really describe it for everyone that's either listening or watching this right now. Now, are you saying it feels different, one, because of Hard Knocks, or does Hard Knocks play a part in why you feels different? Are you saying it feels different because of the personnel? And of course, you're the resident vibes guy. Are you saying it feels different because when you're around the team, the vibes seem perhaps differently than they've felt in the past?
All of the above. I think Hard Knocks plays a role. There's always the Hard Knocks bump, right? with whether it's fantasy players, whether it's
I was wondering that
perception of the
fantasy
team.
part.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Hard Knocks bump is real. So I think that plays a role. The personnel is undoubtedly better. I mean, that's night and day. We've talked about it so many times on this podcast. The personnel is so good on this team. They are a legitimately talented roster. And then I also do think the vibes in the building are different, especially compared to last year. Last year, they were so confident that, like, okay, we're going to get this thing done. We're going to get on track. And then obviously they had that really slow start. And injuries did play a role. You know, they were injured throughout training camp. They were injured in the early portions of the season. They played a role, but they fell flat. You know, they did not meet their own hype. Now it feels like, okay, we are still supremely confident, but we can't fall in that trap again. It seems like they are aware of that. It feels like, in talking with the guys, just the feeling around the building, it feels like they're legitimately adversity hardened at this point. That maybe that callus was still forming a little bit last year. You know, they thought they had been through adversity, but no. There was still more adversity ahead. And we did see them come out of it and become a better football team towards the end of last season. There's a sense of that. There's a sense of that callus. There's a sense of that we've been through this and we're not going to let this happen again. There's a sense of we hear the noise and we believe in ourselves, but we have to put that aside and we got to prove it on the grass. I mean, Jalen Johnson said it himself. Other players have also said it in as many words. Like, all of this talk is great. Talk is cheap. It's time to play football. And that to me feels new. That to me feels different. You put that all together. And you're like, okay, they might actually take these steps. They might actually take these improvements. I'm not saying they're going to be a 13-win team, but I'm saying, you know, playing meaningful, competitive football all the way through the end of the year, which is something that hasn't happened for several seasons in Chicago.
I think it feels different. I would say emotionally, I don't know. Emotionally, I can't say how I feel about this emotionally. I don't have an emotional feeling. It's not that I don't have an emotional feeling about the Bears. I do think this season will be better. But I think with me, it has to do with more logic. And that's not discounting you or anybody else. I think competency is something that, as a Chicago sports fan, that we fiend for, because the up and down seasons that these teams could have can be frustrating, particularly when this is a sports town. So, and me saying that, we put a lot in our time and the amount of love that we care, win or lose, for these franchises. And I'm going to ask you at one point during this show, who were the winners of Hard Knocks for the Bears? But one of the winners, I want to say, I'll just tell you my number one winner for this. And then later on, we can go through yours and the rest of mine. My number one winner was Ryan Poles. Like, I think Ryan Poles, the league is already on notice that he's an up and coming front. Well, he was on notice when they hired him. The Bears hired him, I should say, that he was an up and coming front office person coming from one of the best run franchises of this era of the NFL with the Kansas City Chiefs. But then you got to see him more. And like you said excellently, the Hard Knocks bump. The Hard Knocks bumps helps Ryan Poles because it lets the nation know a closer look into, oh, I've heard about this guy, but now I can kind of see who this guy is. And then, of course, the emotional aspect with, you know, the Adrian Colbert situation. And then even how Adrian Colbert talked about how special it was him being here. Think about it. He wasn't here during the season. He's saying, like, I'm just being here meant so much because they let me be me. And this is my favorite organization because of how they made me feel. They didn't try to make me fit into their ideal of what a player is. They let me be Adrian, basically. So I think that, and getting to that, Ryan Poles first, and there's still question marks when it comes to Matt Eberflus, but like I said last episode, and I was saying, the team's never quit on him. And we have seen, particularly defensively, we've seen that he can make adjustments. Like some of the stuff as a Bears fan in the past, and this is plenty of coaches, clock management, like there are always things where it's like, dude, come on, this is part of the job. And if you can't do it, you got to get somebody that can do that. But with Ryan Poles, and they're sewing up so many holes. When you talked about all these past quarterbacks a second ago, I'll say this about all those quarterbacks. Majority of the time, there was questions about the talent around them. You know, like how often, maybe I can't remember. Was Allen Robinson here, Mitch's first year? Or was it the second season?
I want to say he joined. I'll look it up, but
okay.
Shout out Eric Strobel, wherever you are. You'd have the answers for us.
Shout out Strobel right there. but the point being, I feel like when you look at how competent and how it for me it makes sense. Well, I can be analytical when it comes to sports from the point of, does this make sense? Like when Ryan Poles doesn't trade something away, and I also will talk about a weakness in Ryan Poles in this episode too. So it's not all butterflies and honeycups when it comes to Ryan Poles, but it's definitely 80. No, it's more like 85-15. All right, really good stuff. Did you have the Allen Robinson?
Yeah. Allen Robinson showed up in 2018, so that was Mitch Trubisky's
that was
second
year, but that was really the year because you had him as a backup his rookie year, and it was all the transition over John Fox.
The Mike Glennon handoff.
Long neck Glenn. But still, so even with that, like, so you had Allen Robinson with Mitch, and that's at least a nice key factor to have in that situation. But no, very few, if any, quarterbacks have started out with 3 stud receivers, period. All right. I mean, we question the offensive line, but they're better bodies than when the offensive line, than when they got here. Yeah. We want to see them be available and play through this. But that's where, to me, like when I talk to people on the streets and they may look at me as being optimistic, I'm like, I'm not being optimistic as a fan. I'm being optimistic because look at how they make it make sense. And that to me is Ryan Poles showing that, he could perhaps be a special general manager. And I think here in Chicago, like, for instance, I love the fact you're a Sox fan, but because we're Sox brothers, you know what I'm saying? But when you think about, you know, what Theo Epstein did for the Cubs, you know, like it made sense. Like when you can miss a year, but when you think you may have him in head of charge of the front office, it brings a different feel, a different sense of calm as a fan than when you're always featuring and worrying about the roster and the talent and trading. But when you know you have perhaps a very smart and in tune person doing that, it brings a sense of calm. And Ryan Poles is bringing that to me as a Bears fan. So that's really why I feel the Bears are moving in the best direction, to answer the question.
I'll add that to the conversation of why this feels different, why this hope feels different. And I think, to summarize it, I think the Bears just feel like they're built the right way now over the course of several years. I remember going back to Ryan Poles' first draft in 2021, and we talked a lot about there are so many holes that they can take the best player available. They don't even have to worry about positions of need, right? We had that conversation a lot. But then when they went nickel corner and strong safety, people were like, what are you doing drafting a nickel corner and strong safety? Those aren't positions of need. They just went out and got the best players available. Even last year, Tyreek Stevenson, another outside corner. What? They need defensive ends. They need all defensive tackles, all these different guys, right? And I guess they did get Jervon Dexter. But my point is, they identified talent, and they brought the best talent in, and then they said, we'll figure it out later. But right now, let's just get the best talent that we can in here. And sure enough, a lot of those players turned out to be cornerstone players. They identified talent that was on the existing roster and extended that talent, namely Jalen Johnson, namely Cole Kmet. When
a guy like Roquan Smith, this was a hugely controversial move that you and I even had problems with at the time. Roquan Smith wanted all this money.
Whoa. Problems as
maybe
far as
just
what?
me. Maybe it's just me.
Check the
Here.
Josh
It's the full thing. It's the full thing of we're going to say goodbye to Roquan Smith, but then we're going to pay Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards. At the time, it's like, why are you not paying one linebacker to pay another linebacker? Well, they actually got kind of two for the price of one with Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards. And it, again, ended up being a good move. It seems, at least, all of these prudent, disciplined decisions make it feel like this roster is built the right way, rather than, again, in the past, it's the big splashy move for Khalil Mack, similar to the big splashy move for Montez Sweat. But then following that, throwing a ton of money at Robert Quinn. And unfortunately, Robert Quinn wasn't healthy, when Khalil Mack was healthy, and then they, kind of took turns, right? Robert Quinn had that great year afterwards. But it feels like Ryan Poles has never overextended himself in that way. The cap money has been disciplined. The drafting has been disciplined so that there's still some powder dry. They still got a lot of things in the chest. I couldn't point at a contract on the Bears roster and say, oh, wow, that's a crazy contract, man. How are they going to get out of that one? DJ Moore, incredibly reasonable deal.
That was the Roquan.
Exactly.
That was the Roquan
Exactly.
I said then, paying him, I love him, but it was always going to be, damn, they gave him that money, and he is almost a fit. But for this defense, he's better in the 3-4, being a middle linebacker in the 3-4, than playing Mike or Will in this defense, in my opinion. And
sure,
I think he would have been nice, but I'm sorry for cutting you off. Please continue.
No, you're fine. So we've seen that discipline, right, with the Matt Judon trade.
Great point.
That's an opportunity where it's so tantalizing to go and get this guy who will be a difference maker on this team now, but he stays disciplined so that he's not overextending himself, so that he's not mortgaging the future of this franchise for the present. It just feels like this team, this roster, was built the right way, so that now when you have the opportunity to get the quarterback, you bring the quarterback in and everything else is in place. And now it's just like, okay, now let's hit the ground running, rather than, okay, let's do everything we can to get the quarterback and kind of figure it out on the fly. So that's another reason why I think things feel a little different, is because it feels like they might be actually built the right way this time.
On the mortgaging future aspect, he may have done a little mortgaging the future if he could have got a 4th round pick. I'm not for Velus, so we can jump into this discussion, because you and I have debated this for some time, because I asked you would another team pick him up, and that was probably one of the reasons they didn't want to send him through waivers. But this isn't on you as much. I'm not blaming you for this. I'm blaming because this is, let's not be idiots here. The Bears control what they show, and they are going to want to show fans, oh, we couldn't let Velus hit the waivers because it was somebody was looking for it. And I'm not saying that they weren't. I thought, and I said this to you, it's too tempting for a team to be like, yo, some offensive coordinator / special teams guy, like, yo, let's try this with him this year. He's too young still. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've seen Brian Mitchell move around the NFL to so many different teams, from the Eagles to the Commanders. Like, you see those special team guys all over the place. And of course, he hasn't proven himself as a special team guy. You saw Chad Morton pound the table. You saw Hightower pound the table. You saw Chad Morton bring him into the room and let Velus know he wasn't going anywhere, and how he expects great things from him. Alex, your thoughts on the behind-the-scenes view of the Bears retaining Velus Jones for another season?
So this is where I'm giving myself the big fat L, because on that roster cuts episode that we talked about, I suggested that the Bears might be able to sneak him on the practice squad, because I was thinking, who wants to take a risk on this guy who has had so much trouble holding on to the football, even though, yes, he is very explosive. Boy, howdy, was I wrong, because apparently there was not only interest for a potential waiver wire, but so much interest that a team is at least offering something. We don't know what that something is. Maybe it was a 7th, maybe it was a 6th, just so that we don't have to play the waivers game. And then the Bears are like, oh, it's got to be a fourth. And, who knows what's happened on
really
the other
rich.
end of that phone.
It's really rich.
Exactly. Who knows what's happened on the end of that phone?
I don't want to say,
but obviously, right, exactly. But yeah, I mean, obviously the league, the Bears, obviously we've known this for a while. The Bears like Velus Jones, they see something in Velus Jones, but obviously the league also kind of agrees. In a similar sense, the Bears were ready to move on from Justin Fields, and the league also kind of told you what they thought, what the other 31 teams thought, which is he's a backup. It's interesting. It's interesting how fan perception and NFL GM perception, outside perspective, even media perspective, can vary greatly from what NFL GMs see. And again, we talked about it a lot. Velus Jones looks really good as a running back. I said that a bunch. It's the ball security stuff that worries me. It's the
takes a minute.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But yeah, obviously that playmaking ability, that physicality, the elusiveness, the speed, put that all together. It's intriguing. So the Bears are definitely giving him more runway. And I was absolutely wrong when I thought the Bears might be able to sneak him on the practice squad. Absolutely wrong.
We all do it, bro. This is anybody that sits on any of these shows and is like, I always get it right. I mean, unless you're joking, we've all made mistakes. I mean, how many of us wanted Chase Claypool? It wasn't just Ryan Poles that wanted Chase Claypool to be an answer. All right. Like, remember us all talking about we stopped Green Bay from getting him? Now Green Bay won them, and we got him away from Aaron Rodgers. Man, we should have sent us and let Aaron Rodgers get as much as he wanted back in those days. So we've all done it. We'll continue to do it. Look, shout out to you for standing up with your mea culpa, because a lot of people run to hot tuck tail when it comes to stuff like that. I want to get your winners. I got Ryan Poles is at top of my list of winners, Alex. So give me your winners of this season of Hard Knocks Bears training camp.
Caleb Williams is the first guy that comes to mind. Just the off the field demeanor that he showed, the way he works with his receivers, his obvious understanding of what's going on, that the high level tweaking of, hey, I want you to break this route off like that when you see this. That stuff was awesome to see. And then we also got to see the journey, which was true. This is something we saw play out. We got to see the journey of first couple weeks are clunky and ugly, and there are operation issues, and they got a lot of work ahead of them. To then they're putting in the work and it's getting better. To the preseason games where it's like, whoa, this looks like an NFL offense all of a sudden. So seeing the on-field progression, awesome. Seeing the behind-the-scenes progression, seeing him work with his wide receivers. If there were any folks left who had questions about his character, who had questions about his ability, who had questions about anything, I would hope that, or I would think rather that this goes a long way to kind of quieting those concerns.
Yeah, and the character questions were always suspect, to say the least, because he didn't get in trouble in college. He was I won't say rich if we're talking about what true great wealth is, but he was a lot richer than I am at this point, right? Like, and a star in one of the devil's playground, to say the least, and I'm joking, in Los Angeles, right? And speaking to a USC alum on this podcast, right? I mean, SC is everything, particularly when they didn't have national football teams within the confines of Los Angeles. Yeah. But him crying to his mom being something that was always, I mean, I get if you don't like it, but that's never the end all be all to where it's like, I can't have him on my team. It's like, did you see him play? Right? Like, did you see him? Did you see him? Right? He's not a bad kid. And did you see him play? So definitely I'm with you. The reason that I didn't name him, he is like partially the reason Hard Knocks is here. So it's like, I just don't think they could mess it up. Like, I don't think Caleb would have allowed them to mess it up, to be honest with you. Because Caleb, and I'm giving him props for this, Caleb's going to do what's best to ensure his legacy. So he wants an organization to commit to him like he wants to commit to himself to being great. You know what I'm saying? So, of course, he wasn't going to come out here and let them put some BS or some smut on his name, to say the least.
Caleb Williams isn't a businessman. He's a businessman.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Shout out Jay-Z. Sticking with quarterbacks, and I'm going to keep using something you said, of course. It's that Hard Knocks bump. I think Tyson Bagent and his dad, because we know them here. We know them here. But nationally, I think that helped. I think, one, we talk a lot about developmental quarterbacks and hopefully what the Bears can start doing. And, of course, it's pie in the sky, but I've mentioned what Mike Holmgren, when he was the head coach of the Packers, did with Aaron Brooks, with Hasselbeck, with
was that Matt Flynn also?
Matt Flynn, but it was one that was sweet with the Jaguars. I'm forgetting the Jaguars quarterback out that they got. He was nice. I'm blanking out on the Jaguars. He was a lefty QB. But anyway, that the Bears perhaps can do something like that with their quarterbacks, where it doesn't have to be a 3rd round pick, but you can get a 5th if a team is interested in Tyson Bagent. But I think Tyson Bagent, and it's funny because even with you and Josh talking to him and him saying, I can't tell you guys, what I'm dreaming about as far, no, my expectations or my goals that I have, because they're going to seem far-fetched to you. If I tell you, you're going to think I'm crazy. I think this lends itself to that vein where you can see this young man has a real great dedication to trying to get what's best out of him. You can see it in his body makeup. You can see it in his focus. So I think that nationally helps him nationally be someone that people maybe, because he went to Shepherd. It's not like he played at one of these big schools in the SEC or Big Ten or formerly, of course, the Pac-12.
It's so a lot like he's playing at Temple,
Great point. Power 5. So it gives a lot of people that didn't see him last year a chance to necessarily get to know him. So I think it and all really the quarterback room. I think the Bears backup quarterbacks got a lot of shine that they wouldn't have got. I think it helped. Now again, I won't say it. Look, it could have been, in all fairness, it could have helped Brett Rippon with the Vikings calling him. Now, of course, at the Sam Darnold injury, but they're watching this. So they're getting a little better idea, perhaps. Not to say that they don't have coaches on their roster who have worked with him in the past, but it could have benefited them. I'm not saying that's what did, but I think, of course, those were the ones that stood out. I want to name 2 other things that were winners. DJ Moore's new home. Shout out to, and his baby. His family's going to welcome another child. His daughter was a star of Hard Knocks, intelligent, little, beautiful girl. One thing I have to have, and I'm putting this on the show right now, DJ Moore, when you retire, you have to do a podcast like Jeff Teague or Gilbert. Like, DJ Moore has so much in him that he just keeps back behind that smile. But the smile means several different things at several different times. Or plenty, like I need DJ Moore telling us what he doesn't tell us after his playing career is over. I really want that from DJ Moore. Also, last, when I'm sticking with properties, and I didn't mention this in past episodes, and I had seen it, Matty Velus's property, that lakefront property is ridiculous right there. What is that, Kenmore? Where's he living in? Like that, the beehives? But the fact, out the back,
your backyard is Lake Michigan.
Like what? Like that, right? Listen, that flex. He Kingsbury flexed on us in that draft for the Cardinals, right? Like that was a hard flex. So that was for me. Were there any other winners for you? And they don't have to just be people; they can be objects too, or places, I should say. Alex,
that's a good question. I don't know. I think we covered a lot of them. But going back to Kingsbury's house versus Fluce's, give me Fluce's house all day. It looks like a real home, the outdoor space. Kingsbury's house felt like you were living in like a sterile computer where like everything's white.
It was hard.
I'd be like afraid to sit down in Cliff Kingsbury's house. You know what I mean?
I feel like if I was a bachelor, Kingsbury crib may be the spot for me because it's like an estate for a bachelor. But like if you're talking about like my real home,
yes, I'm talking about living in the home.
You grew up in Chicago, so the Midland Ocean, which is known as Lake Michigan. That was hard. Was there anything else that stood out to you before we get up out of here? I know you got a hard out.
Nah, I think we covered it. I think they ended strong. I think the last 2 episodes were the best 2 episodes. And I just appreciated all the insights that we got.
All right. Guys, we'll be right back in the next couple of days giving you the Bears preview game versus, of course, the Tennessee Titans. We're definitely going to break that down with my guys. I appreciate Alex, Tony, Claire, and, of course, Josh, as we start to transition, this month, I should say, as this show goes to the new network with perhaps new personalities. So I just want to wish my guys and everybody the best. This has been some great times here. So we'll definitely see you. All right, everybody, be safe. And we hope you enjoy Hard Knocks. And we also hope you enjoy a little bit of time here with us here on the Under Center Podcast.
Congrats, you finished the video. If you want to build on that success, download the NBC Sports Chicago app. It's got highlights, exclusive insights, and push alerts tailored to you. Everything you need to be a real Chicago sports fan. Download it now.